There is a British sketch comedy show from the early 2000s, which has made it into my Instagram algorithm. So I get these clips over and over again. Sometimes it's the same ones. I actually think the show is called The Sketch Comedy Show. I think that's the name of it. And there's a routine that I particularly love, which opens with a brain surgeon at a cocktail party. And he is introduced to an accountant. And they're hanging out together, and the brain surgeon turns to the accountant. By the way, any CPAs in the room? No? Okay, couple? No offense, okay. And the brain surgeon turns to the accountant and says, "What do you do for a living?" And he says, "Oh, I'm a CPA." The surgeon nods politely and says, "Accounting, very important, very organized." And he takes a sip of his drink and he says, "Of course, it's not exactly brain surgery." A few minutes later, this brain surgeon finds himself talking to another person, this time an aerospace engineer. And the engineer asks him, "What do you do for work?" And the brain surgeon answers, very proud of himself, "I'm a brain surgeon." And then the aerospace engineer takes a sip of his drink, stands up pretty straight and says, "Impressive, you save lives, very important work. Of course, it's not exactly rocket science." Okay, let's move on to some Torah. Our parsha this week marks an important and perhaps even confusing shift in the book of Shmot, the book of Exodus. While the first part, as Rabbi Steve mentioned this morning, focuses on slavery and freedom and God hearing our cries and God using these miracles and immense power to take the Jewish people out of Egypt and ultimately teach the world that all human beings are meant to be free, the middle part of this book shifts to receiving the Torah and a whole list of laws that we read last week. But then this last third of the parsha abruptly shifts to something completely different. And now our parsha focuses on the building of the Mishkan, the tabernacle or the traveling temple, this temporary temple in the desert. And so many rabbis have asked this question, why this shift? Maybe to ask it a little differently, why place the story of building the Mishkan in the book of Shmot? It's not directly connected to the Exodus story, and probably it would have made more sense for it to be a part of Vayikra, the next book, which is all about the sacrificial laws and all the things that would happen inside of the temple. So maybe we should just make a shift, end the book of Shmot here and do it a little differently. And so I want to share with you a take from Rabbi Jonathan Sachs, Zichrono Livracha. And he says as follows: when Bnei Israel, when our ancestors were finally freed, but before the splitting of the Red Sea, and they see the Egyptians coming behind them who have changed their mind, how do they respond? Right? We cried out to God and said, "Weren't there enough burial plots in Egypt? You had to bring us here into the desert to bury us over here? You could have just left us alone. Right? Why take us out?" After they finally make it to the other side, again, what's the next thing that happens? They're thirsty and they complain again right away. The water's too bitter, we can't drink this stuff. And then another miracle. A few parshas ago, what happens? Finally, the moment of revelation, Matan Torah, being at Mount Sinai. The next part of the story, what happens? Right? Our ancestors become afraid. Moshe is up there for too long. Maybe it's a miscalculation. They didn't have a good accountant with them. And what happens? The golden calf, the great sin. And it's almost as if we're reading God's inner monologue. And Hashem is saying, we need a change of course. We need something different. And so what does Hashem say? Let's give them a chance to build something together. Let everyone contribute to this great project. As we said in the opening words of this parsha, Met kol ish asher yidvenu libo tichu et trumati. Let each and every person, according to the generosity of their hearts, find a way to contribute. And as the Torah later tells us, they do. They spend all morning, for days, bringing their riches, bringing whatever it is they had, their way of contributing. Everybody gets involved. And there's a great moment and a great lesson here. Rabbi Sachs describes it as a change, a shift. And he says, it is not what God does for us that transforms us, but it's what we do for God. What power we have, what gifts we can bring. And what I add to Rabbi Sachs' words is, perhaps most importantly, what is it that we can do together? That's the shift over here. And that's why it fits in the book of Shmot. Hashem says, I need to give them an opportunity to be builders of something that is greater than just themselves. A slave's life is about, how do I get through this next moment? How do I survive this very day? If we're going to become the people of Israel and the children of Israel, we have to find a way to care more than just about ourselves, but about the collective. Rabbi Yitz Greenberg discusses in his book, The Jewish Way, which for me is still one of my really favorite books of all time. I read it in my undergrad days. It was written in the 1980s. And he really thinks about Jewish history and the stories in the Torah and the Jewish holidays that we celebrate today, all through the idea of covenant, about the relationship between God and humanity, and later on God and the Jewish people, with the idea that as human beings, we are meant to take on more and more responsibility in the relationship. That is our job, is as a people and as a community, and also as individuals, to take responsibility for our lives. In other words, to put on our big boy pants and not expect God to perform miracles for us. Okay, another shift. Now we're going to go to the Olympics. Anybody spend time watching this week? Yeah? Show me your hands if you're excited by the Olympics. I have to tell you, I find it so exciting and so moving, even despite the fact that the Canadian women lost in, the gold medal in women's hockey. That's okay. Maybe the men will have a chance to make up for it tomorrow morning. But I love it. And one of the reasons that I love it is that it is all about, in some ways, the individual, right? The physical body, what we're able to do, how we can transform ourselves in order to compete at this super high level. But we're not doing it for ourselves. I say we as if I'm one of the Olympians, by the way, right? It's done according to your nationality. You do it for your country. You drape yourself in your flag after you win. Right? It is about this sense of community, about being part of something greater. Yes, it might be my individual work or as a team what we are able to do together, but we are doing this for our country. Among all the many storylines in this year's Olympics is this group that is known as, I'm not making this up, this is true, they call themselves Shul Running. What is Shul Running? Right, based on the Jamaican bobsled team in the movie, which I love that movie, called Cool Runnings. Shul Runnings is the Israeli bobsled team. Okay? Anybody watch them compete this week? In the two-person, but yeah, a few of you. You're probably as disappointed as I was. No, really. I was just relieved that in their final run that they made it down alive, because it wasn't clear at one point that that was going to happen. They came in 26th place out of 26 teams. And they were so proud of themselves. Okay, really so proud of themselves. The team leader, A.J. Edelman, you might be also maybe more familiar with his brother, Alex Edelman, who performed here, I guess about 2 years ago here at Betzedek, the comedian, who's actually coming back to Toronto later this year. He is very funny. His brother, who describes himself as not a great athlete, but just competed for Israel in the Winter Olympics sheerly out of will, right? They went to the Olympics basically without a coach. They hardly had a bobsled to go down. And although it's very pretty, draped with the blue and white and Israeli flags, they knew they were going to come in 26th place. But why did he do it? So in all his interviews, A.J. Edelman basically said that Jews need to get involved more with sports. They need to get more involved in this. It does something good for the soul. It builds community. And he's like, I, a mediocre athlete, am going to show the Jewish community that we need to get involved in sports. And that's why he did this. And he put together a team, which included himself, AJ, Menachem Chen, Omer Katz, and Uri Zisman as an alternative. And who is their fourth person? Ward Farwase, who is the first Druze person, citizen of Israel, to compete for Israel in the Winter Games. And so his team included a Druze Israeli, and that was deliberate. He could have found somebody else who's willing to run like a crazy person after this cart down ice going 130 kilometers an hour. But he wanted to build, I know, you went, oi, me too. Trust me, watch the clip, you'll say it even more. He wanted to build community. Aspirations that were greater than just his own desire to win something, which he knew he wasn't going to do. But then something else happened this week. While they were going down their second run, which was as bad as their first run, the Swiss public broadcaster who was covering the bobsled competition decided to talk about the war and to talk about Israel's actions, describing it as a genocide and all of that. In the 2 minutes that it took them to go down, it was all about Israel's actions, about the UN. That's what the broadcaster decided to focus on. Eventually, there was a lot of pushback, and the Swiss broadcaster decided to take down this clip and their covering of it. But the truth is that the damage was already done by taking this moment of just sports, of sheer will, of a sense of community, and turning it into something else. And how did Edelman respond? This is what he said. Working together towards an incredible goal and crushing it. Because that's what Israelis do. And I think that's also what he means, is that's what Jews do. Is that we try as a community to work towards things that maybe people think are impossible. But that is our Jewish history. Right? We all know the famous line of Herzl, right? Im tiltzu enzo agada, if you will it, it is not just a dream, but people believed it was impossible to have a modern state of Israel. Right after the Holocaust, or Rabbi Yitz Greenberg talks about this all the time, what was the response by the Jewish community? Is we were going to take power, but we were going to take power to build things. In Israel, we were going to build a new country, a thriving Jewish peoplehood in Israel. And in North America, what was our response going to be? We were also going to take power in order to help as many people as we can. Got involved in the social rights movements, found ways to use power to help the collective in both of those situations. I was sharing yesterday with Reb Steve, with Rabbi Wernick, what I was going to talk about today, and he said, that's the Jewish way. when we go through suffering, when we go through hardship, what do? We try to find something to work towards. How do we take our pain and suffering and transform it into something else? We all know the psychiatrist Viktor Frankl, whose words were an inspiration for Hirsch, Paul and Goldberg, and many of the other hostages over these last couple of years. But I want to share a quote that's probably less known to us. He says as following: "Being human always points to something and to someone other than oneself, be it a meaning to fulfill or another human being to encounter. The more one forgets oneself by giving themselves to a cause to serve or another person to love, the more human that person is, and the more he or she actualizes themselves." That's what we're meant to be in this world. It is not about the I, even in this world of iPhones and everything else. It is about the collective. It is about what we can build together. And so in building the Mishkan, God teaches the Jewish people and really the world, we're meant to have collective projects. And so we need the brain surgeons, we need the accountants, we need the teachers and the rocket scientists, and everybody else has to bring from the generosity of their hearts their skill to the table to build community and to build our world. Everybody needs to be included. And we brought all the gemstones that we need. And as Rabbi Steve mentioned before, all of the dolphin skins that were required and everything else. But from the generosity of our hearts and teaching us as a people and as a world, we have what to offer. And that is our job, to figure out what is my contribution in this moment. How do we work together to continue to build the Betzedek community? There's a new vision that Mitch and Debbie are going to share with the community in the next couple of months. And it includes making sure all of us can find a way to bring ourselves in, to support each other, to teach each other, to be in relationship with each other. That's what building community is. And such a pleasure for me to be on this journey with all of you. Shabbat Shalom. We're going to continue with Musaf, which can be found on page 155.